All right, guys, so Mr. Enshine and I have been working on grading your tests, so please look at Schoology, check those comments, read through those. Mr. Chine also worked the test with all the correct answers, and that's posted as an update in Schoology, so you can watch that video if you have any questions about your test and why it's wrong or how to work it. We're starting our last chapter of 6th grade, which is crazy to think about. So we are going to combine some of chapter 9 and some of chapter 10 together to make up this last chapter. So this week we're learning lessons 9.1, 9.2, 9.3. Next week we're going to review on Monday and you'll take a quiz on Wednesday. Then we'll learn some of chapter 10, review, and you'll take a test. All of the plan from now till the end of that chapter test is on that chapter plan document that you've been using ever since we've done e-learning. So keep using that link, keep using that document so you can see the links to the video, the links to my notes that I take, and what you need to do, the homework checks, things like that. For this chapter, you do not need to submit your notes. That was hopefully getting you in the routine of taking notes, so you continue taking notes, but you do not have to submit them for this chapter. What you will need to do is watch the video and take your notes, keep those to yourself, and then you do need to do the homework check at the end of every lesson, and you will need to retake that until you earn at least an 80. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with lesson 9.1. All right, lesson 9.1 starts on page 413, and today's date is the 20th. All right, chapter 9 and chapter 10 are talking about statistical measures, and then chapter 10 is talking about distribution, data displays, different ways to display data and what to do with data. So with chapter 9, or lesson 9.1 is an introduction to statistics. So before we get into talking about what statistics is, let me give you a couple questions and see if you can figure out the difference between these questions. So first of all, one question that you might ask is, what is the heart rate of a 6th grade student? So heart rate of 6th grade student. Another question that you might ask that we're going to look at the different types of answers that you might get. How many states are in the United States? So how many states in US? Let me write down the rest of the questions. Okay, so how much does a movie ticket cost, and what color fur do bears have? So looking at these questions, the heart rate of a 6th grade student, is everybody going to get the exact same answer for that? No, you will get different answers, right? You'll get different answers. How many states in the US? Will everybody get the same answer for that? Yes, so this is one answer. One answer. How much does a movie ticket cost? Will you get same answers for that? No, you'll get different. Depends if you go to Cinemark 17, Studio Movie Grill, AMC, so you'll get different answers for that. And then what color fur do bears have? You might get different ones for that as well, yeah. Depends, black bear, brown bear. So you can see that this one you get one straight answer. There's no wiggle room around it. These are all different answers. If you can get different answers, then that is a statistical question when you don't expect to get a single answer. So let's write down those definitions of what we're talking about today is statistics and statistical questions. Okay, so statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, analyzing, and interpreting data. And statistical questions, you do not expect to get a single answer. Some of those questions up here that we were getting different answers are statistical questions. How many states are in the US is not a statistical question. That's just a factual question. With your statistical questions, you're interested in the distribution and tendency of those answers. So how often are certain answers occurring? right now, a lot of people and researchers are looking at the coronavirus and looking at the statistics of the coronavirus and the different level and severity of the cases. And so this is something that really you'll see a lot of statistics, a lot of data that's being collected and organizing and analyzing and interpreting all the data of people with the coronavirus going on right now, the COVID-19. So this is something that, you hear a lot about. You hear a lot of statistics. There is also the census going around that you fill out to so the United States can gather all the information about the people living in the U.S. And so those researchers are gathering all that information and are going to collect it, organizing, analyzing, and interpreting all that data. When you get to college, you can take a class just specifically on statistics. So that's a pretty interesting course if you have the opportunity to take that. So let's look at some more questions and determine whether they are statistical or not. All right, so here's some questions. Some of them are statistical questions, some of them are not. So see if you can pause the video and determine which ones are statistical questions and which ones are not. Okay, so you should have paused the video. Remember, the difference that you're looking for is which one has different answers. If it has different answers, then it is a statistical question. If it has just simply one answer, then it is not. How many countries start with the letter Z? This is not a statistical question. You can get an actual answer. How much do bags of pretzels cost at the store? That is a statistical question because it depends what store you go to. How many days did ESD have off for Christmas break? That is not a statistical question. That's factual. You can go and count the days and get an answer. What are the hair colors of students in 6th grade? That is a statistical question. Some of you have brown, black, blonde, red, pink, whatever it may be. How many desks are in Mrs. Darnell's or Mr. Chine's classroom? That is not a statistical question. You can count them and actually get an answer. And then how much does a headset cost? So like a headphone, microphone, how much does that cost? That is a statistical question because it depends on where you go to buy them and what brand you get. So hopefully you all can understand the difference between statistical questions and not. So looking at the difference between these two statistical questions, we asked a question about hair color and we asked a question about cost of pretzels. Hair color, you are not going to get numerical data. You're going to get blonde hair, brown hair, black hair, pink hair, red hair. So that's not numerical. That's not numbers. If you ask cost of pretzels, that's numerical data. You are going to get numbers. So we can display that in using a dot plot. So a dot plot is one way. It uses a number line and it's a way to display the data. A dot plot uses a number line to show the number of times each value in a data set occurs. It shows the spread and distribution of a data set. Shows the spread and distribution. So that means the spread, it shows like how far apart the data is or how clumped together it is, and the distribution is how frequently numbers occur. So let's look at a dot plot. Looking at this dot plot here, okay, so looking at this dot plot, it says you record the high temperature every day while at summer camp in August, then you create the vertical dot plot. Find and interpret the number of data values on the dot plot. So what that means is just find the number of data values. Let's count them to see how many data values there are. If we were to count every single dot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So there are 28 data values on the plot. So that means here, if you recorded the high temperature every day you were at summer camp, then you were at summer camp for 28 days. That's finding and interpreting the number of data values. How could you collect this data? So you could collect it using a thermometer, and what are the units? Would be degrees Fahrenheit. Write a statistical question that you can use that you could answer using the dot plot. So you could ask yourself, once you collected this, you could ask yourself, what was the daily temperature while I was at camp? What was the daily temperature in August? If only those temperatures could be our temperatures in August, right? 80 degrees in August, 87 degrees in August, that would be pretty nice. So thinking about this, you want to think, what does each dot on the dot plot represent? Each dot on the dot plot represents, that means it's one data value. There was one day that it was 87 degrees. There was one day when it was 86 degrees. Actually, there were 4 days that it was 87 degrees. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days that it was 86 degrees. Only one day that it was 84 degrees. So you want to think about this data plot, dot plot here, talks about the spread and distribution. So the spread means how similar or varied. The days in August only varied from 80 to 87 degrees. That was only 7-degree difference between those two. And then the distribution is how frequently the numbers occurred. So the peak, the most, were 86 degrees. So if you were to ask yourself daily high temperature in August, you could say it's about 86 degrees because that's where the majority of the days occurred. So let's look now at this dot plot here, and we are going to answer some questions using this dot plot. So this dot plot here says the times of students in a 100-meter race. So let's find and interpret the number of data values. You have questions like this on your homework check. You have to find and interpret the number of data values. So what that means is count the dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So there are 20. That means that there were 20 students in the 100-meter race because it shows the times of students in a 100-meter race. So there were 20 students, 20 data points collected. How can you collect the data? Well, you would time the students running, and then what's the units? Here it would be seconds. You can see that they would run 100 meters in that amount of seconds. And then what's the statistical question that you could answer using that dot plot? How fast can a 6th grader run a 100-meter race? And then you could kind of look and see, well, the majority are right here, and the peak, the most, is right here at 13.8 seconds. Okay, so now this example you should try on your own. You should be able to find and interpret the number of data values here. You should be able to write a statistical question that you could use to answer, that you can answer using that dot plot. So pause the video and get that. Find and interpret the number of data values and write a statistical question using the dot plot. All right, so to find and interpret the number of data values, you could have counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's 16 data points. Since this is distance in miles, a question that you could have used is, how far did you run this weekend? Or how far do you live from a friend? So this could be, it could be a lot of different things. How far did you go on a walk? Lots of different things, or a bike ride. So each data point that we counted could be each person that you asked. So hopefully you have a little bit of an idea of how to find and interpret the number of data values from a dot plot and how to answer a statistical question. So here's an example I want to look at together. Your teacher asks you, what is the mass of a typical mouse? You conduct a science experiment on house mice and use the data in the table to answer the question. So here's all the data in the table. In order to answer that question, you would need to create a dot plot. So if they made the dot plot here, the smallest number was 18, the largest number was 28. So in their dot plot, their number line went from 18 to 28, not skipping a number. They did not skip a number. Their actual went all the way from 18 to 28. Then they put a dot above each value. So they said, okay, 20, put a dot above 20. 18, put a dot above 18. 28, put a dot above 28. Another 20, put another dot. 19, put a dot. 19, put another dot. 20, put another dot. So it's also really important that when you do that, that you make all your dots somewhat of the same size. So then you can actually compare and kind of line them up and see. Once you have your dot plot, you can see that this is a cluster. A cluster is when several data points get together in an interval. So this is a cluster. There are a lot of data points right here. You can also look for a peak. A peak is the data value that occurs the most often. So here is the peak. It occurs the most often at 20. You can also look for any gaps. So you're looking for cluster, peaks, and gaps. A gap is when there's an interval with no data. So here there's no data, so that's a gap. It kind of separates the data. These are really three really large mice, and then this is where the majority are. So most of the data are clustered around 20. There's a peak at 20 and a gap between 23 and 27. So to answer that statistical question, what is the mass of a typical mouse? You would answer about 20 grams. Okay, let's do these last two problems together, and then we might do actually another one just to make sure that you're full understanding. So this one right here, you record the amount of snowfall each day for several days, then you create the dot plot. So here's your dot plot here. Find and interpret the number of data values on the plot, on the dot plot. So remember, find and interpret, you count them all, 1, 2, 3. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and answer A, B, and C. All right, let's go over it. So find and interpret the number of data values on the dot plot. Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So what does 14 mean? That means that there are 14 days of snowfall. You recorded the amount of snowfall each day for several days. That means that there were 14 days. How can you collect this data? And then what are the units? You would determine whether it snowed or not. Then you would actually look and see how much it snowed. Now this doesn't tell us the units, but you can imagine this could be inches or this could be feet, depending on how much where you are, if it snows a lot, so inches or feet. How you would collect that data is you would actually measure it. Write a statistical question you could use to answer the dot plot. A statistical question that you could use is, how much has it snowed, for the last 14 days? That could be a question. You could look at this too and see that on most days there were between 1 and 3 inches or feet of snow. That's kind of like our cluster where the majority of data is. And the peak is at 2. So you can say that it's 2 or 2 inches or 2 feet, depending on what unit you chose. So hopefully you're able to kind of look at the dot plot and answer these questions, looking and seeing what these dots represent. Question number 9 says, you conduct a survey to answer how many hours does a typical 6th grade student spend exercising during a week? Use the data in the table to answer the question. So in order to answer this question, you could create a dot plot. So I'm now going to go over here so I can create a dot plot and look at that. All right, my smallest number was 1 and it went all the way to 5. If you want to try and make a dot plot, let me show you that screen one more time so you could pause it. So you can pause it and create a dot plot. You need to make your number line go from 1 to 5. Okay, now let's create it together so you can check. So from 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what these are is these are actual hours, right? This is how many hours does a typical 6th grade student spend exercising during a week. So let's put dots above. We have 1 dot above 5, 1 dot above 4, 1 dot above 3, 1 dot above 1, another dot above 5, another dot above 4, another dot above 5, another dot above 2, 6, oops, I didn't go all the way to 6, I didn't see that there. 3, 5, 5, 5, 4, and 6. Okay, so see, you can use your lined paper to help you kind of keep your lines, your dots in the right order. I could have done a better job of that. But looking at this, how many hours does a typical 6th grade student spend exercise during a week? You can kind of see the cluster is right here, and then the peak is right here. So your answer would be about 5 hours. That would be the answer to your statistical question, about 5 hours. Let's do one more example like that, just practicing creating a dot plot, because that was our first example of actually creating one. So here, example, your teacher asks you, what is the weight of a typical cat? You conduct a science experiment on cats. Use the data in the table to answer the question. So here's all the information that you gathered. All right, so let's answer the question. In order to answer that and kind of organize that data, let's go ahead and make a dot plot. So pause the video, make a dot plot, and then check with mine. Okay, so I'm going to do a better job using my actual lines on my paper to help me keep those dots spaced appropriately. So using that, that information on weights of cats in pounds, so I know I have weights and pounds. That's where you need to label your dot plot. Now, the smallest number that I have was 7, and my largest number that I had was 20. So on your dot plot, you needed to go from 7 to 20. And then you needed to put dots above. Okay, so your dot plot should look like this. 1 dot above 7, 2 above 8, 2 above 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 above 10, 2 above 11, 2 above 12, 1 above 13, 14, and 15, nothing over 16 and 17, and then 18, 19, 20 each have 1 dot. So if you counted all of your dots, that's how many data points you should have. That means that's how many cats you weighed. So that shouldn't match the amount of numbers that you have in that table. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 20 amounts, data points in our table. So I should have 20 dots here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So I can always check to make sure that I didn't forget one. Now you can see that here there is a gap between here. That's a gap. You can see that this is a cluster here. Cluster, and that would be the peak. So then your answer would be about 10 pounds, because that's where your peak is, about 10 pounds. Okay, so at this point, hopefully you're familiar determining whether a question is a statistical question or not. You're comfortable able to read a dot plot and able to find and interpret the number of data values on a dot plot, able to see the peaks and use it to answer questions. You need to complete the homework check on Schoology, and Mr. Chine and I are available on the Schoology conference if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.